What does failure look like to you?
um, Failure looks like a lack of willingness to to pull yourself up by the bootstraps,
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. Hey, well, Heather, welcome.
Thank you.
I am so pleased to have you today on Learning to Swim. And this is the format of this is I have questions that I will ask you. Learning to Swim, the title of my interview series really comes from the idea that a lot of times it's that old joke of the young fish swimming through the water. The old fish swims by and says, "Hey boys," or "Hey people, hey fish. How's the water?" And they're like, "Water? What the heck is that?" So learning to swim is about kind of diving into bright spots and blind spots and the stuff that really are maybe our strengths and our gifts that we sometimes recognize and sometimes don't recognize, and often have so much to do with our personal and professional success. So I want to share with you a little background about Heather. Heather has more than 30 years of proven experience and expertise in executive leadership, management, strategy, and effectiveness in the nonprofit, public sector, and philanthropic sectors as an executive director, director of development, foundation program officer, consultant, and executive coach. Wow. And she has worked in the arts with education, social and human service organizations, environmental groups, and membership associations, among others, ranging in budget size from $100,000 to $25 million. And she takes a highly collaborative approach, easy for you to say.
Yeah.
She takes a highly collaborative approach to working with her clients through thoughtful discovery and customization to meet organizations and individuals where they are and identify achievable, meaningful objectives in a realistic, practical manner. She is focused on delivering quality and effective strategies and solutions that support her clients in building upon and continuing the accomplishments of their work together. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
So let's just dive right in. And so the interesting fact is that this series of questions were actually crafted pre-COVID. So it's a little, sometimes I find that interesting as I go through them. So my first question is, what does resilience mean to you?
And that is such a good question. Anytime, right? And this particular period is teaching all of us, young and not young, to kind of look at it again, right? Like resilience is not something that we often think of in a consistent way. And so it's interesting, I've been participating during all of this time in a lot of gatherings, many of them sort of focused on women, but not all of them on the whole concept of resilience. And there's an individual resilience and organizational resilience. And I really think it's about about sort of understanding what it means for you, right? What you need to feel some kind of resilience. And I think resilience would be a combination of courage and creativity and willingness to go there.
Well, and I love the word courage in particular because the root being the French word coeur for heart. And so courage to me so much, is kind of a visual association also of just really leading with your heart.
Yeah.
So I like that definition, courage and creativity. So, kind of along the same lines, but what does failure look like to you?
um, Failure looks like a lack of willingness to to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you know, when times are hard. I think I did in the last few years, you know, was really struggling with where I was, psychologically and also professionally. And I was, for some reason, I was always looking for sort of psychological and spiritual tools to lift me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had this little list of like the 7 F's of failure. So people like to define things, right? They like to define resilience or failure. But I would just, you know, try to be succinct and say that it's really giving in, giving up, and not trying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, kind of what resonates for me and what you're saying is it's not necessarily it's not in the kind of the minutia of the mistakes along the way,
Right.
but really it just kind of the lack of
Right.
continuing on.
I mean, you can define the symptoms, if you will, of being on the path to failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like, you know, oh, poor me, you know, fear, you know, running away from things. I mean, you can define what the indicators are.
Yeah.
And the ultimate is not doing anything is the ultimate kind of definition, right?
Right. For
Sitting.
sure. Well, so you mentioned in thinking about resilience, courage and creativity. And you and I, when we have spoken earlier, have talked a lot about, well, I shared with you my interest in creativity and looking at creativity, not so much as being artistic and kind of
Mm-hmm.
differentiating between those, but really creativity around problem solving. And so for me, that there's a component of curiosity too that plays into creativity. So I would like to know, how do you remain curious, or if, you know, creative is a better word for you?
You know, I really appreciate these questions because I'm old. You know, I mean, and so not jaded, but it's funny because these sort of definitions change as you spend more
Oh,
time on the planet. So
for
repeat
sure.
exactly what you asked one more time.
Yes. So the basic question is, how do you remain curious?
How do you remain curious? So, um, you know, it's almost like I don't do it intentionally.
Mm.
I think when we spoke, I was telling you about how I've stayed busy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
stayed engaged and active while during this period of not, you know, going out and engaging, you know, physically in various and sundry. And everything I've been doing, I think, has been out of this innate curiosity of what's out there. In my case, I'm very interested, you know, I'm very interested in philanthropy. I'm very interested in coaching. And I'm very interested in kind of personal spiritual development. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just have this innate curiosity or desire to keep exposing myself and learning and absorbing where I can find quality resources to do that. So it's sort of embedded. I don't know, you know, it's
It sounds
funny.
like
Maybe
that's
it's
one of
something that's
your,
innate. Maybe, I don't know. Can you
yeah.
create curiosity? I don't know.
Well, I do think that you can be, I think that there are certain individuals that are born with kind of a more curious nature. And then, it is, I think, one of those interesting traits that develops very specifically within that nurture nature balance too, right? Is if it was appreciated as you grew up.
Yeah. And, to the role that both of us have in helping others be who they want to be, right? Coach,
Right.
guide, guru, doula, I sometimes would say. I think that is part of the role there, is to help people find what inspires them to be curious if it is not a natural, if
Yes.
it doesn't come easily or naturally, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times in the work that we do as coaches and consultants, it's really about asking good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes much more than having these perfect answers.
Oh, yeah. Because our answers are not their answers.
Exactly.
Our answers
Exactly.
talk about authenticity. And that's the whole model, right? We can give ideas, and help people kind of find their, something that resonates for them. But,
Yeah. So, what is your secret or not so secret to a meaningful life?
Wow.
And it could be at this moment.
Yeah.
It could be kind of a snapshot of right now, or it could be kind of something that is more kind of a global definition for you.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, because it makes me remember when I was, about 30 years younger, maybe 40 years younger. And what was meaningful to me was making a well, at that time, it was kind of creating beauty, if you will, and I can give you an example. And then beauty beauty for its own sake, cool, and beauty that sort of gives to others, that is not just sort of isolated and in a cocoon. So in my first sort of professional role, I was the first director of a small multidisciplinary arts center in the middle of nowhere in New York State. And I used to say I was trying to create and fill a need at the same time. And there was no collection, there was no mission, there was no purpose to the institution. I had to create it from nothing. And so one of the things in my role as the director was, I was to manage the institution and all that kind of stuff, but also to create exhibitions and put exhibitions together. And there are three exhibitions in particular that I recall, like after they were installed, I was just standing there and going, oh my God, this is so beautiful. It is so, and it's because I did all this. I mean, it takes a village, right? It wasn't just me.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of them was a show of children. They'd never done this before. I went to all the schools in this little community, and I asked all the teachers, would you like to have your kids' artwork on display? And then I decided to go to the senior residences. And this was in like the early 80s, when people just weren't paying attention, right? And I went to the senior homes or whatever, where seniors gathered. And I said, would you like to have an exhibition of your work? And so they filled this art center with work from the schools and work from the senior homes. And I had a big open space, and the teachers went bonkers with the kids, and they created these huge 3-dimensional, like, dinosaur thing, and it was colorful, and the walls were filled floor to ceiling. And I called the show Both Ends of the Rainbow. And they ended up doing it years and years and years afterwards. The other show that I decided to do a juried quilt exhibition, a competitive juried quilt exhibition that had contemporary quilts and traditional quilts in it. And again, filled this entire space with phenomenal, beautiful work. And the third one was a folk art exhibition. And what I did was we sort of went around central New York State and found all the folk art, both historic and contemporary, people who were still making folk art, and did this gorgeous exhibition. It was gorgeous. So that was sort of one part of a meaningful life, right? Is really bringing joy and creating something of beauty. And then the other is very, emotional to me. I mean, I've spent the last 15 years, part of my time, helping my family navigate very, very serious medical issues. My father had a terminal disease, and I had to take over being the family manager for that. And it was while I was living in the area. And now my mother tomorrow's her 86th birthday, and she's a very courageous, creative individual who's extremely physically fragile. And so that's very meaningful to me too.
Yeah.
To really be, my role is really all about other people. It really is.
Yeah, well, I hear you, even in your bringing, I mean, it really feels like a life of service. And I mean that in the best way.
Giving out.
Yeah.
Giving out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, what's your best simple habit? What do you, and I guess when I was crafting this question, I was thinking about professionally, what would be kind of that simple or that habitual thing that you do that you feel like has been kind of consistently supported you. But again, since we're in this, excuse me?
Professionally,
but since we're in this other kind of different time too, I think our habits are shifting a little bit.
Yeah. Well, but I don't know if this is a habit, but it's what came to mind. And it's something I do pretty consistently. And it's consistent with what I said earlier is I'm always trying to learn. I'm just always trying to absorb and find information and learn kind of best practices, if you will. It's interesting because in my field, the term best practices has been used, and then about a few years ago, they shifted it to leading practices. I don't know why they changed from best to leading. It might have been that best seemed like the ultimate and like it wasn't ongoing or active.
Right.
I don't know why. It was interesting. I never really studied that, why they changed. But, whether it's leading practices in care management, which I'm doing now for my family, or leading practices in philanthropy, or leading practices in, working with boards or helping coaching. But that's my habit is I'm just always like looking out for like what's really good, what are people doing that I admire, that I want to learn from.
Excellent. Good. So what would be one word to describe your professional journey?
One word. I'm going to go to learning, but I sort of high aspiration, aspiration. Always trying to be the best, or,
Yeah, I
quality.
understand. Yeah. And then one word to describe your life.
My life. Interesting question.
It's just for now. It can always change.
I know. I'm grateful. I think gratitude, grateful.
Yes, for sure. And it's that one resonates for me too. So I'm always curious about what was your very, very first job or task that you were paid for. So, whether it was when you were, mine was about when I was like 10 years old or something. But so like, what was that very first job or task?
I don't know if I started at 10. Well, I know what my first job, well, I used to make, I used to do sort of craft objects. So, but that
Hmm.
wasn't really a job, you know.
Oh yeah, but I mean, and you sold them.
Yeah, I sold them. So I
Okay.
made objet. But you know, my first sort of job was um, working in a printing press in the town where I was living, doing, you know, very rudimentary graphic design. And it was
Mm,
so long ago that everything was pretty much done by hand, you know, it was
right.
very rudimentary technology. The technology would not even be the appropriate word.
Right, right.
It was
Well, and how do you, so the reason why, and then my follow-up question to this is how do you see, if any, that these first uh,
mm,
types of activities, whether it was creating the objet that you were selling or the early uh, graphic design work that you were doing, kind of how has that informed kind of your current
yeah.
work or your professional life?
Well, I think, you know, it's a wonderful question, and thank you for asking it because it kind of connects me with the idea of creativity that we talked about earlier. So, when I was a teenager and you know into my early 20s, I was identified as a creative artist. Everybody said you're great. You know, I had a lot of natural artistic talent, um, and one of the challenges, I suppose, is that I didn't have the discipline to like focus on any one in particular other than what I love to do, which was draw.
Mm.
So, so a lot of people expected me to go into, you know, sort of the creative arts. I instead went into more manage, you know, working in arts organizations,
Right, right.
doing, I mean, I was a graphic designer and worked in sort of creating visual materials for initially, and then started running arts organizations. So yeah, so it's kind of nice to reconnect with that creativity and realize that, you know, even throughout all my other work, which may be, you know, more administrative, executive management, there's always been this element of creativity. So thank you for
Yeah.
the question.
Oh, you're welcome. So, what would you consider? So, circling back to this idea of the water that we swim in,
Mm,
what is what's your in plain sight talent?
in plain sight. Oh, you mean,
What's the thing that that other people would identify that you're very clear on is one of your talents or gifts?
uh-huh. um, well, one is being organized, very
Okay.
organized. You know, now is, you know, I mean, I keep everything organized, but I'm doing a lot, right? So a lot of balls in the air, keeping
Right.
things organized.
Well,
And
that's a good one. I mean,
yeah,
that's a big one.
yeah.
Yeah. And then what, if any, are you willing to share any of your hidden talents or ones that may not be so obvious to everyone?
Oh, well, I like to think it's a talent. I hope it's a talent. One of the other areas of creativity in my youth is I love to sing.
Mm,
And very also it's totally self-taught. But I was early on exposed to the great folk voices and musicians of the late 60s and early 70s. So um, I have worn several records out. I haven't worn CDs out, but my secret dream is to sing backup for Emmylou Harris.
oh my gosh.
So
Oh,
I love singing. I love singing sort of roots, blues,
mm,
folk, you know, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, you know, Bob Marley,
oh,
Talking Heads,
fun.
you know,
Yeah.
kind of diverse, but I love to sing and it's hidden away right now.
Oh, how fun. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love learning that. So, this is definitely a pre-COVID question. Your next trip, where are you going and why?
Well, can I have a few?
Yeah, sure.
Well, one is I need to go see my mother, but that I can do. I did that in July. I drove up to the Bay Area, Santa Fe,
Mm.
Paris, in the south of France.
Oh, yes.
We were hoping, actually, we were planning. We've been planning for, I don't know, 18 months. We had a friend who had decided, an American who was living in Paris, an American in Paris. And she had an apartment there, and we were planning to go hang out with her and then travel around. We love the south of France, but we haven't seen nearly enough of the rest of the country.
Right.
But yeah, then she actually had to come home because her visa ran out. And she had to come home for 6 months. And then she has an elderly mother here in Los Angeles, and then COVID. So,
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
how about you?
Oh gosh, I know the list goes on and on, but I would be right there with you in the south of France for sure. What is your looking at the calendar of in it? You can include your birthday. What's your favorite holiday?
Wow. My favorite holiday. I grew up. I'm Jewish, so I love Passover. I do love Passover, and the reason I love it is because of a gathering, because of the story. I was raised in the civil rights era. A very impressionable period for me was the civil rights era, and I was raised in a university community where many of the people, at that time there was a Seder. Are you familiar with the Seder?
Yeah.
So there was a Haggadah, the Seder guide, that was written by civil rights advocates. So it's called the Freedom Seder. And that's what I grew up with. So I grew up with this mindset of that, not only is Passover a time and an event to share with many people and to relate to, the story as a bigger story. So I love it as a gathering. I love the whole idea of the dinner, drinking a lot of wine, having latkes.
Yes.
And that story is at its ever more important, for better or worse. So I guess I would say that is my favorite.
I love that. So I have just a couple more questions. One of them is a little bit, little random, but do you have dreams where you fly? Do you ever have dreams where you're actually flying?
Oh, flying?
Yeah.
When I was young, I did. And I think in most cases, it felt very powerful. It was powerful, not scary,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little bit like, whoa, what's going on here? But it was cool. It was very cool.
Wow.
I have not, I don't have many dreams now. I have trouble sleeping.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like thinking about things I want done. Sometimes, usually not by me. By other people. Just do it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it's funny, but not funny. Because it puts me in I hate the position it puts me in. It puts me in, having to like give ultimatums, and I don't like doing that.
Yes, that is a tough one.
Whatever. It's not fair. It's not right for these people. This person who did this. But yeah, I used to have dreams that I flew. Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it. It felt very empowering and
Yes, for sure.
It's very random.
I know. So, and then kind of thinking, because as we've talked, you do have a lot going on, and we connected professionally. We both are in kind of in a similar field here, and so I guess I would be curious, what would be, if you could look at one thing within your consulting practice or coaching practice, what would be one thing that you would want to improve upon, that you feel like is kind of one of those things that you're, maybe it's that you're consistently working on, or that maybe more in this time?
Mm-hmm. Aside from marketing.
That could be, I mean, that.
Connecting with people. But no, I think, the thing about coaching is that I feel like I'm always trying to improve as a coach in terms of really helping people to get at the deeper aspects of what either gets in their way or what could empower them. And, that's not always, it's not easy,
No.
And it's, you really want to be a partner on the journey with someone. So it's always trying to, just try to constantly improve how to not get caught up in your coaching mind.
Right.
In the moment, right?
Yeah.
Like not trying to figure out, I when I was earlier on, I was paying a lot of attention to the coaching competencies that are published, right? And it's like these indicators of different levels of coach competence, if you will, or coaching proficiency.
Right.
One of them that I can remember very visually is that you don't want to be like sitting there thinking while the person's talking to you, like, how am I going to, So right. I'm always trying to improve, I think. Not that I go there all the time. It's something that when you ask a question, I thought about.
Well, and then the other question I have for you is because one of the things that I'm really interested in working with clients around is this kind of big picture of employee engagement, which has all these different components to it. So I would be curious, because you've worked in, this wide array of different budgets and different size organizations, I'm imagining, in different disciplines. What is, in your experience, like, what is the one thing that most employers miss when, that they're saying to themselves, oh, I want to work on employee engagement? But what is that thing that they most often miss?
I don't even have to think twice about it. It's the whole idea of giving employees voice and buy-in, and finding authentic ways to do that in almost any aspect of the workplace that the employer can figure out how to do that. Yeah. And I'm going to I don't even know if I need to define the word authenticity, but so it's not condescending. It doesn't feel, what is that? I can't come up with the word. It's not condescending, gratuitous. So it's not gratuitous, right? So it's truly authentic. And it's interesting because in almost every aspect of life, buy-in and having a voice is so critical. It's just so critical. And it's harder to do in some instances than others. But I think if that is the place that the employer comes from, you can't hear my phone ringing, can you? Okay, because it's in my ear. I could go turn my phone off, but I won't. So it's really about, trying to be as creative and open as possible as you can be about how can I give people a voice in whatever decisions are before us. And I realize that that's not easy to do, and that people, that's the opportunity in the coaching conversation, is to help the employer unpack and understand better where their resistance is coming from. and what they're willing to do and what they're not. But it's really about, how do you give people a voice in a very authentic and generous manner, without being, and trusting.
Yeah. Right, for sure. Well, thank you for that. That's, yes, I would agree wholeheartedly. Well, Heather, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know
Yeah.
you, and thank
Yeah.
you for your transparency and your willingness to embark on this journey together. I will have information on the screen for folks who may want to get into contact directly with you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
And of course, and for now, we will be, we'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great set of questions, and thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.